Good evening, welcome to a foreigner in the Philippines. Monday came came by with a bang. Today we spent most of the day, most of the morning dealing with our comments and emails and stuff like that, and uploading, editing, which is our usual scene anyway. But we've been staying home a little more these days, and especially with that threatened typhoon. I say threatened because actually we didn't feel anything at all. It must have sailed straight past us. Must be something we said, huh? So, about midday, we get another call from lovely May, and what has been happening is that the single mother that was in the mountains that we built a house for went on to have other problems. There was an uncle around, a fairly young man, in his, I would think, mid-late 20s, and a young girl of 14, Nicelle, and there were some difficulties there, which you will have seen in another video. Well, bad went to worse. What was extended to Nicelle was that she could go and stay with lovely May. Now, lovely May, as you may know, has a very nice townhome in Taliban. So the child went and stayed with lovely May, and everything seemed to be okay there. But then the mother started to kind of lose it, and she went into, well, what can we say? What's that old-fashioned expression? A nervous breakdown. And started to get very, very stressed out. And then I think that the uncle must have done some behind-the-scenes rallying of support, because he wants Nicelle to come back. And well, you can make up your own mind about why he would do that, but certainly it was implied that there was some unwanted attention on the girl. She is a very pretty girl, and it would be easy to see that someone who was a little bit short on ethics might start to get ideas. So that seemed to me to be a crisis that we really wouldn't want to get into. If the guy starts drinking or something like that, and then some other alteration happens in the mind, who knows what will happen. I prefer to think worst case scenario in this case and get the girl away. Well, we had a barangay meeting, and it was agreed that Nicelle, the child, would go and stay with lovely May. Later that was amended by another meeting here at our house. The young man came up, and he had a couple of people with him. He brought Josephine, and he brought Beth's uncle, who seemed to think that they would like to see the family back together. Well, what can we say? It got rather difficult. Nicelle didn't want to go home. Now, why she would not want to go home is really open to interpretation. Maybe it is the fact that she was in a much, much nicer, more comfortable situation than she was at home when she was living with lovely May. She had her fare paid to go by tricycle each morning or by van. She could just go down into Taliban, because it was all within easy walking distance, get on a van, and it would drop her off at the top of the road to her school. So maybe that was it, that appealed to a young lady with some appreciation of the good life. So she didn't want to go home, and then the mother started to stress out even more. And then today we met with the mom, and an agreement was struck that in fact the girl would go back at first. But then she had other ideas and she ran away. You can't write this stuff, you know. So she ran away. So we now have a runaway 14-year-old girl. It's one thing to have a runaway 14-year-old boy, but having a runaway 14-year-old girl is, and a very pretty one at that, is really asking for a lot of trouble. The wrong kind of predator might surface, and then we'd be looking at a lot of heartache for everybody. So we went, as the title of our video suggests, tracking down a runaway teenager. Well, the Filipino mind is much better at these kind of things than mine is. So we all got in the truck, Josephine, lovely May, and we went down and we called out someone who we knew was a classmate. That classmate agreed to come with us and take us to where she thought that the best friend of Nicelle was. And sure enough, she was there. Well, after a lot of agonizing and logic, misplaced of course, we managed to persuade Nicelle to come with us. And what was agreed was that Mananglina, whose old house, little tiny house, is just sitting vacant right next to their new house that we built, and Lena said that the two ladies, mother and daughter, could come and live there until things at least settle down. So we managed to talk Nicelle into coming. What sort of sweetened that up was that we said, well, first of all, why don't we all go into Taliban, into a restaurant. We'll go to PP Coffee and we will have a nice meal, and then we'll all go home. So that was what we did. We went to PP Coffee, met up with Brian and and another friend, Lester, and his girlfriend. But what eventually revealed itself was other people in trouble, and we ended up going to the homes of two of the girls that had helped to persuade Nicelle, yes, you should go. And we took them all. We took them all for a meal. So it was Nicelle and three other young women about the same age. Well, we went out, and it soon revealed itself that two of the girls, one of the girls, the youngest, is, as you will see in the video, another very pretty. It seems to be the way, and her family is fairly well off, so she's not in any trouble. But the other two, they each have their own story, and they'd, once again, another, like history repeats itself, they were unable to go to school. One of them had been off for a week, the older one off for a week, and the younger one had been off for 2 weeks. A short story on that is that we are going to help to support them so that they can go back to school, and they're going back to school tomorrow, and we gave them money so that they could get the supplies. This is often what is the case, is that children just don't have the supplies to be able to go. Notebooks, pencils, pens, and they just don't have them. And sometimes they don't have a bag either. So we're trying to get all of that handled, and we've given them money so that they can actually go and get back into the classroom. But then the older girl reveals an even more troubling situation by telling us what her mother does. And there are 4 children in that family. In what we started out to just look at the house, because we'd been told that the house was in pretty bad shape. And when we got there, the mother wasn't there. So we're looking at the house, and it's the typical ramshackle affair. And then finally they said, oh, the mother is coming. Well, it turns out the mother is almost 60 years old, and she earns a living for the family.
Hi, welcome to a foreigner in the Philippines. We're here in Lovely Man's apartment. Sorry, darling.
She earns a living for Beth is doing editing while I'm doing this. She earns a living for that family by wielding a hammer, and with the hammer she breaks down larger rocks, a little bit like the chain gang setup that you used to see on American movies. And she smashes the bigger rocks into smaller rocks until they are at, I think, a number 1 or a number 2. They got everything's in numbers here. The rocks have to be about this big. Now, for that job of doing that, sitting there breaking up rocks, she earns, I think it was 48 pesos a day. 48 pesos a day for breaking rocks into smaller rubble. And she works at that every day, and that's how she supports her family. So there's always a heartbreaking situation, and this is not, it's not a pity party, you know. There's no complaining and whining and look how badly I'm having it. No, she was quite matter of fact. I asked her through Beth, of course, how old are you? And at first she said 60, and then she turned out, she said, well, I'm actually 59. What a tough life, eh? The husband has died, so she's on her own, and these are incredibly chastening experiences to come up against these people who have nothing. Is really well, it's an exaggeration, isn't it, to say that she's got nothing. I looked in the house. Before we looked into the house, which is just one room again, the older girl, the daughter, had tidied up, which took about a minute, and she just put the bedding to one side. There's nothing in there. It's like they have no possessions. Outside there is a smaller seated area, but only barely, and an outside dirty kitchen where they do the open cooking, and it's all on the video of that particular little event. But boy, it's kind of like nothing prepares you for this. We walked a long way through quite a trashy part of the land, lots of trash around, and then it gradually opened out, and it was a little bit like the same kind of setup as Tag, but she is able to get out and work, and that's what she does. And it's a very bittersweet experience to find people that can do this. We gave 1,000 pesos to the older girl, and she straight away wanted to give it to the mother, and we said, well, you need to go down to the store with that money, and you need to get the provisions, the school provisions that you need, so that you can start school again tomorrow. So they need money for little projects that come up, that same thing that's rearing its head again about children being expected to pay for projects. So whatever these projects are in school, they're not free. The schooling is free, but can you imagine if you're working for $1 a day and they want 30 pesos to do some kind of writing, school project in a day. Desperate, you just can't go in. I mean, the thing is that they're extremely embarrassed by this as well. They're extremely embarrassed to take the money. If you watch that video, you'll see that I was holding the money to give to her, holding it out to her for the longest time. And with the second girl, I actually took her hand and pressed the money into her hand. It's tough to actually see this stuff, you know. It's tough when you think that you're dealing with a runaway kid who's actually in a very lucky situation. And then you go to see these other kids that are her school buddies, and that's when you really begin to see that some people out there are having a terribly tough time. And even lovely May, who was with us, as we walked away, she said, what is amazing is that they have so little and yet they're still able to smile. This is a foreigner in the Philippines, just going over, not a typical afternoon, but yet not untypical. We see it a lot. Thanks for looking in. Don't forget to comment, subscribe. Do subscribe. Do share. These things are a little bit unreal. Sometimes to actually listen to it, it's like being told a story. And of course, it is a story. It's a story of poverty and heartache, and yet it's a story of incredible survival of people who are facing privations that you and I, if you're in a Western country, you and I could not even imagine. Thanks a lot. This is a foreigner in the Philippines. Bye for now.